early tomorrow morning. Now, Parliament's about to draw to a close here for the 6-week winter break, a relief to many, no doubt. Let's check in now, as we try to do on these occasions, with Liberal frontbencher Paul Fletcher. He's with us now in the studio. Welcome back, Paul. I imagine there might be some tendency to want to relish in Labor's discomfort about Fatima payment when someone splits under these circumstances, religious and policy conviction, it seems. But aren't there very strong similarities here with your own experience with someone like Cory Bernardi, who quit for very similar reasons in many ways?
What we've seen, I think, since the October 7 terrorist attack in Israel and the way that's then been reflected in domestic responses in Australia has been, frankly, a lack of leadership, it has to be said, from the Prime Minister. Going back to, for example, the 9th of October, when we saw the terrible protests in front of the Opera House, we saw very abusive statements being made about Jewish people. There's been, I think, a lack of clear leadership from the Prime Minister, and again he's shown, I think, that lack of clear leadership over the last week in terms of how he deals with Senator Payman.
But if that had been applied to your prescription, that would only have left her wanting to depart even earlier, wouldn't it? If he's been indecisive.
This has been a test of leadership for the Prime Minister. We've seen now that Senator Payman has decided to leave the Labor Party. But what we've also seen is equivocation from the Prime Minister, from Foreign Minister Wong, about, for example, the right of the State of Israel to defend itself. We've seen a story this morning that the Israeli ambassador was called in to be dressed down by Tim Watts, the Assistant Foreign Minister. That's an appallingly disrespectful way to treat one of our longest standing allies, the only democracy in the Middle East. And I do think the tensions within the Labor Party reflected in Senator Payman leaving need to be understood through that prism.
All right. The Coalition did ask a number of questions about Senator Payman's welfare throughout the week. If you were genuinely concerned about it, wouldn't it have been open to you or other members on your side to have referred this to the relevant Workplace Services Authority?
Well, actually, the way that scheme works is that the only person who can refer is the person who's the complainant, somebody who says that they've been put in a position where they're not getting support. So
why did you ask that question, or not you, but Susan Lee yesterday?
Well, we very carefully phrased the question to ask the Prime Minister essentially whether he was supportive of Senator Payman referring herself should she choose to do that. Let's be clear, the Prime Minister on a number of occasions has talked about the importance of a supportive workplace. At Parliament House, we have here a young woman expressing concern about being bullied and intimidated. So we did ask that question about her welfare and whether she was availing herself of the resources available to her in the Parliament.
OK, now Speaker Milton Dick, you were there when he informed the House, has ordered a wider review of security around the building after protesters from two causes disrupted the House earlier and 4 arrests were made. In your own assessment, is security lax? How did this happen?
I think there was clearly a security breach to allow protesters on top of the building to be unrolling banners, to be left there, I think, for about an hour and a half. That was very troubling, and the Coalition, of course, condemns the actions of those protesters, but we do have concerns about the time it took for a response. But again, it needs to be linked to the broader lack of leadership, I'm sorry to say, from the Prime Minister since the 7th of October attacks.
So you're pinning the existence of the flags and the people who climbed over the top of the veranda to prime ministerial leadership?
What I'm saying is that there's been a lack of clear direction and leadership in our country since the 7th of October, and that's been reflected in things like encampments lasting for weeks or longer at our universities, Jewish students saying that they do not feel safe, and instances where, for example, state police have told Jewish Australians it's not safe to be here, you shouldn't be here, when there were Hamas sympathisers protesting. Right. So that breakdown of public order is very concerning, and we've seen equivocation from the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister, and we need to see a much clearer statement of values on these issues.
All right. On a matter, there's been a few moving parts around the Parliament today. Over in the Senate, you might be aware, Paul Fletcher, that the Coalition helped inflict, if not the first, we think it's the first, then one of the earliest defeats of a bill on the floor of the Parliament. This was to create the Special Joint Defence Committee. Now, you started out in principle in support of that. Why did you let that principle stand in the way of the committee's eventual creation? Because it won't be now.
Look, it's not the first time, by no means the first time the Coalition has voted against government bills where ultimately we're not satisfied that they achieve their objective, or that they do what the government has claimed they're going to do, or that there are unintended or adverse consequences. And for example, we've voted against the Housing Australia Future Fund, which is dressed up as supporting housing, but in fact is not, frankly, delivering any material benefits at all. So there's been quite a number of bills we've voted against. I don't think there's anything unusual about the Coalition voting against a government bill.
It's just that this one was successfully defeated.
Sure, but
it may have been the first. If not, then maybe the second.
But in terms of what the Coalition did, what we did here was what we've done on a number of other bills where we don't think they're up to scratch. We vote against them.
All right. Winter break beckons. Campaigning for you?
Certainly I'll be out and about in my electorate, as will all of my parliamentary colleagues, making the point to Australians, do you feel better off than you did 2 years ago? And the answer on the numbers is no. In real terms, Australians are worse off. And if you've got a typical mortgage after 12 interest rate rises, your household's about $35,000 a year worse off. All
right. Well, that might save you a couple of door knocks. You put that on the record. Paul Fletcher, thanks so much. We'll talk again soon.
Cheers.